got some. That's good. You met, sir? No. Sir, met हुई?
Yes, sir, but I attended his offline classes.
अच्छा. आज तो खराब टॉपिक है, आज तो नहीं आना चाहिए था. Today you should not have come. To this methodology. You know, sometimes the questions are to be approached on the basis of the broader understanding in sociology. For example, last year they asked you the feminist perspective on the research. So if anyone who has idea on feminism would be able to do justice with that one, except the few names, to substantiate your view, not to frame your answer. From tomorrow the things would be more in terms of theory and other. Tomorrow. 2 I'll be picking up. We'll be having the brief account of that one. Some finer points which we are missing. You can watch the video of the last class where I talked about the sociology of science and modernity in Europe and emergence of sociology along with the common sense. So I made the certain diagrams, so you just watch it, so that way things should be much more easier in part of it to understand it, how to project the data. Because in this 70 days, the point is to enhance the marks, maximize the marks. Because the basics has been done. So we'll be rebrushing the basics, we'll be not forgetting the final points, so to fetch more marks, alright. No, you should go through your class notes. Because most of the times when the guides are made, you never know the person who is from that discipline or not. The ambiguity in your answers should not be there. Because if your answers are not lineal, sometimes it eggs the examiner. You understand the lineal, no? In a one line. शुरू करें बेटा. Good afternoon. Today is the second class and we will be picking up the research methodology and a very brief of the theoretical strands from the unit 2. Let's begin with this line. That when we were taking the mains, research methodology was not very popular unit. But of late I am finding certain questions coming from there. The basics are to be known to you. And sometimes the questions which comes out, that has to basically be viewed in terms of your broader understanding in sociology that you have developed while reading sociology. For example, when I was looking at the last year question, I found about the feminist perspective of research. So the moment we started going through the system of kinship particularly, and more precisely patriarchy, division of labor, sexual division of labor and entitlement, you might have gone through the feminism and you might have come across the certain kind of issues what the feminists have raised. The similar kind of perspective that has to be talked about. And that way, the common sense, application of the common sense will make you understand the certain questions. Sometimes the offbeat question comes out, like I was looking at content analysis, the one question which was there. Biography has been asked to you in the recent times, last to last year. So that we will be looking at and we will be going with in terms of understanding. the sampling questions are coming out in terms of probable, non-probable sampling. One time they have asked the questions in terms of the scaling techniques, measurement techniques, Bogart's scale and the Likert scale. So that way the certain questions are coming out. But of late the questions which have been there either in terms of the data collection, in participant observation, interview, schedule, questionnaire, case studies. So that way we'll try to look at that how the perspectives from the research methodology will be coming out. I said about when you're looking at, and this has been general habit of mine in the last so many years of teaching. Then very first day when I met you, I said that the questions which have been there, the probability would be there that the question may not be asked. We also need to anticipate that from where some newer set of questions could be raised. And in this 70 days, you not only have to read, to develop the concept, to rebrush the concept, but also in your preparation, think about that from where the questions could also be coming up. So let's talk about, I'll break the unit 3 in terms of the tabular form which I do. All right. From here you could find the certain questions will come out in terms of types of research. And then you will also be looking at the syllabus, you will be finding about the debate between qualitative and quantitative one. From here, some newer kind of perspectives, newer kind of questions are coming out. Last class I told you that when you're looking at the unit 2, particularly when we talk about the common sense and sociology, I said in one line what separates common sense or what separates sociology from the common sense is the scientific nature of the discipline. The moment we talked about Peter Berger, we talked about C.W. Mills, we gave the certain examples. And then we talked about sociology as a science. And in the sociology as a science, we basically raised the concerns in terms of positivism and non-positivism. Whatever the names I wrote in terms of functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism, interpretivism, ethnomethodology, phenomenology, dermatological approach, they all we talked about in terms of. But overall, when we started looking at the debate between positivism and non-positivism, the debate was there in terms of not on the nature of the sociology being a science. Time and again I am saying that most of the books which have been written on the basis of the syllabus of the universities, you go in depth about so many pages talking about whether sociology is a science or not. So at one hand you find about that why sociology is a science, on the other hand you find about certain that on what ground sociology is not a science. But the very premise on which sociology developed as a discipline was to search the social laws akin to that of the natural laws, and from here the positivism right since the inception of sociology played an important role. Thus the very nature of sociology seems to be scientific. The debate is not whether sociology is a science or not. The debate is there in sociology whether the methods of natural science be applied or not. Those who basically was for the application of the methods of natural science, they are the positivists. And those who says no, man cannot be equated with matter. I am taking the continuing from the last class. Man cannot be equated with the matter. Matter does not have a conscience, matter does not have a meaning, matter does not have a feeling, but the humans have. And thus, the search of the new methods that has started emerging out. You place the debate of quantitative, qualitative within that one. So the continuity in terms of The positivism and non-positivism, the debate where we have left last class, will be beginning from here in terms of quantitative and qualitative one. I'll be going bit deep into it.
Sir, one request. Speak a bit slowly. You are speaking very fast. I want to write down things.
You want to write?
I mean, sometimes the words you say are fairly important, so I
ठीक है. Usually, what happens? I don't come prepared. So मैं एक बार flow में आ जाता हूँ ना, ठीक है. I'll see it. You just raise your hand so that I'll slow down. All right? The things comes out. इतना बहुत साल हो गया, 25 साल हो गया बोलते बोलते.
Because this is very tough that when we say sociology as a science and then we study non-positive in school, phenomenology.
No. I quoted last class that when talking about Weber. So I quoted 2 lines of Weber. Weber says sociology to become science does not need to be positivistic in orientation. Alright? And further he says that even if it is not positivistic, objectivity does not prelude it. And that way he goes for the relation of science to value, from where we will finding about the concept of value relevance. And then neutrality. So he says if the sociology is a value relevant, it has to be value neutral as well. Why? Because science is all about facts, not of values. Look at the questions. They are asking the questions from the perspective of Weber. Objectivity and value neutrality from the perspective of Weber. Alright? So when you talk about the question of objectivity in a natural science and social science, it is more of a degree, not of a kind. Alright? And the way we have made the difference between natural and social science, it is also of a degree, not of a kind. It's good that few have come, so I'll slow down and I'll let you write few lines. Alright? And I'll enjoy my day. Alright? At the middle age of my life, I feel more vibrant when the students are there in front of me. ये 2 लाइन जरूर लिखना बेटा. The debate in sociology is not whether sociology is a science or not. The debate is whether the methods of natural science be applied or not. Right? Let me just talk to one of your friend. You just listen to 3 lines of mine. When we started looking at modernity, we started talking about anticipating the genesis of sociology. Sociology, which emerged in 1838, it is a long history of anticipation. And more precisely from Enlightenment. Enlightenment has a connectivity with the Renaissance. After Renaissance, we find about development of natural science. And in the development of natural science, the search of the natural laws that started coming out. There I had used one word. मुझे सुन लो बेटा, मैं तुमको समय दूंगा लिख लेने के लिए. 2 लाइन सुन लो. There we had used the word that is called great. This is a concept that is called a great chain of being. Great chain of being is basically the theological perspective. Theological means religious perspective, propagated and upheld by church. That every animate, inanimate, living, non-living objects of the world, they were hierarchically graded. On the top was God, followed by the messenger, then by man. On the last, on the hierarchy was a rock. Alright? When the development of natural science emerged out right from Galileo and others, we find about that how the theories proposed by the church were challenged. Alright? And that there was a search of the natural laws. But it was not merely a search of the natural laws to study the natural phenomena. It also motivated the social scientists, the historians, that can there be possibility of searching the same laws akin means similar to that of the natural laws. So in a social science, precisely in sociology, there was a concern that sociologists must strive to find the social laws similar to that of the natural laws to understand the social phenomena scientifically. So from the very genesis, from the very emergence of sociology, right from the Kantian sociology, we find about the genesis of positivism as well. Alright? So, Kant, after this, Herbert Spencer, Emile Durkheim, positivist, causal connectivity we will finding about. And then when Weber comes out, Weber says the way the predecessors have tried to make the sociological analysis in tune with the methods of natural science, they have committed a mistake. Alright? And Weber being a part of the German historicism is a debate pertaining to the rising positivism and historians. That is, pertaining to the methods of natural and social sciences. Wilhelm Dilthey, Wilhelm Windelband, Heinrich Rickert, they were the one who had raised the concerns of that the methods of natural science and social science were different from one another. Alright? Nomothetic ideographic, that question has come out to UPSC. That nomothetic ideographic debate was raised by Wilhelm Windelband. I'll write down for you. Correct? Weber is a part of German historicism. He's a neo-idealist, Kantian perspective. And from there, he talks about ideographic approach, historical and ideographic approach. Look at the sentence. Now, if you look at Durkheim, the positivist, I am quoting two lines. Durkheim says, sociology is not in a privileged condition like a natural science to go for the direct experimentation. Thus, he comes out with the comparative methods. The factors of causation in Durkheim would be the comparative methods. When Weber comes out, look at the sentence. Weber says, sociologists are more privileged than the natural scientists. Why? Because they are the one who will be able to understand the unit of analysis what they have picked up. And who is the unit of analysis? Actor. So what meaning the actor has attributed? That is the first hand method. Explanatory first hand, not direct observational one. Alright? So this is, you might have gone through this one. This is called first hand. 2. Direct observational, which you know it because you are a part of the society. And then explanatory first hand. Weberian method is here. Alright? And then videographic interpretism will emerge out. So, this way the debate has to be talked about. So, the difference between qualitative and qualitative is not methodological. It means you now need to look it from the two perspectives. The debate is on methodological as well as philosophical. And more precisely from qualitative perspective. So they asked the question on epistemological dimension in qualitative method, epistemological perspective. So this debate of philosophical would be there in terms of epistemological and ontological. Correct? How we have to do epistemological is to positivism and interpretivism. You know this one? Durkheim? Weber. And when it is ontological on the 3 lines. Right? What I was saying there, that you need to anticipate. This is the only one part UPSC has asked you in a qualitative one. So there could be possibility that the questions may be raised from here as well. Ontological one. Alright? And then concerns in sociological research. Biographies will also come over there. Alright? वहाँ पे उसमें दो में बायोग्राफी भी लिखना, that question has come out there in terms of data collection and life histories.
Biography and life stage.
हाँ, life history.
Life history.
Let's recall back some of the lines and begin in terms of research. When we're looking at the journey of sociology discipline, right from 1838 till 2024, like every other discipline in social science, sociology also focused on the research. And it has been an important ingredient to collect data, to propose theories, to testify, and also to accept and reject certain kind of propositions. And in this very perspective, it is a process of systematic inquiry. So in a very simple line, what is the research? Research is a process of systematic inquiry entailing collection of data, documentation of critical information, and their analysis. It is a structured inquiry that utilizes acceptable scientific methodology to solve new problems and to create new knowledge. It is a detailed analysis with a collection of data which reflects important characteristics like it is valid, it is verifiable, it is empirical, systematic, and the research is also critical. However, when looking at the research, it could basically be divided or classified into the three types. Alright, I'll just rub it off and I'll make you write. I am not heading the research methodology directly from your syllabus. Because if we talk about it, begins with quantitative, qualitative. I was looking at some questions which have been asked over there. So let's talk about in brief, only the diagrams if I make it, it will make you understand on the basis of. It will be there in terms of application. Application would be there in terms of pure and applied research. Alright. It could also be classified on the basis of objectives. This would be descriptive. Explanatory. Exploratory. And correlational one. It means 4. Pure research is basically involves testing a theories, hypothesis that are intellectually challenging to the researcher, which may or may not have practical application at present or may be there in the future. It is also concerned with the development, examination, verification, and refinement of research methods and their procedures. But when the moment you use the term applied, it is the application of sociological knowledge to solve the problems of the mankind, problems of the society. It is the use of sociological knowledge to solve any problem of a group or a society. It is a practical application of knowledge. But when you say here in terms of descriptive, it is attempts to describe systematically any situation, any problem, phenomena, or it is used to promote information or to describe attitude of any issue. Whereas explanatory research attempts to classify how and why. There is a relationship between the two aspects of situation. How and why, there is a relationship between the two aspects of a situation or any phenomena. Exploratory research is undertaken with the object either to explore an area or where very little is known or nothing is known, or to know the possibility of understanding a possible research study, exploring the things. Sometimes in exploratory research, hypothesis is not formulated, because hypothesis, which is a tentative assumptions, which lies between untruth and truth. So in a exploratory research, when little is known, sometimes nothing is known, it becomes very difficult to have the tentative assumptions. So sometimes in exploratory research, hypothesis is not formed. And correlation research is the study to discover or establish the existence of relationship between two or more aspects of a situation. So this is the two. And the third part which will be coming out in application objective on the basis of modes of inquiry here. On the basis of the modes of inquiry, the research methodology would be classified into quantitative and qualitative. You need to listen. Once the class is over, I'll request all of you to listen the video and jot down some of the things. Because every dimensions of quantitative, qualitative I'll open up. Expecting that if the new question comes out, it will take only 10-15 minutes so that you will be able to understand it. I said when we are looking at the quantitative, qualitative, the first debate that will be emerging out will be having its link with unit 2 in terms of positivism and non-positivism. We also need to look at what are the assumptions in terms of quantitative, qualitative one. There could also be a question in terms of this debate entering to the final round, in which now in sociological research we have been recognizing that we cannot have the poles apart in terms of quantitative, qualitative one. According to the situation, according to the nature of research, we basically need to have a mixture between quantitative and qualitative one. There is no only 0 and 10 in between, and that way we started looking at a certain kind of quasi perspective in terms of the research. I'll be giving 1 or 2 names so that you will be using it. But here when you're looking at in the quantitative, qualitative, it will be there in terms of first assumptions. Now when you say assumptions, then what the quantitatives are saying? They are saying social facts of objective reality. I am asking you to relate with Durkheim and Weber particularly, phenomenology, ethnomethodology, symbolic instructionism. That when you say about the objective reality, now what the qualitative will say? That objective reality is socially constructed. And the second dimension and assumption should be the quantitative research methodology will be focusing on data. Primacy of data is more important one. Wherein a qualitative one, primacy of the subject matter is more important one. Now can I ask you to recall back only 2 lines. Social facts as a sui generis in Durkheim. the meaning attributed to the actor, and knowing of that meaning attributed to the actor should be the first concern in sociology, which you need to interpret. And that way once again this positivism, interpretivism will be coming out. The third line of assumption is the quantitative one is basically focusing on the single reality. And here the qualitative one is focusing on the multiple realities. Variables in a quantitative one are identified and measured. But when you look at the qualitative one, variables should be complex, because we'll be talking about the different individuals. So the variables would be complex. It will be interwoven with one another, and sometimes it becomes difficult to measure. And you also need to look at the 2 words which I am using it. The nature of quantitative research is etic, E-T-I-C. Etic is outside in. And the nature of qualitative one is emic. So the two words which I am using, ethic versus emic. This word emic will also be emerging in symbolic interactionism, in interpretivism. So ethic is outside in, and this is inside out. The difference between qualitative and quantitative could also be viewed on terms of purpose. For example, the quantitative method is to classify and construct a statistical model. It believes in generality. It is more in terms of causal explanation. But the moment you look at the qualitative one, it basically believes in a detailed, complete detailed description. It is contextual. It believes in interpretation. And it believes in understanding the actor's perspective. So the two differences we talked about, assumption and purpose, they will also be having the difference in terms of approach. If you are looking at the quantitative one, it begins with hypothesis, and qualitative one ends with hypothesis. The quantitative one is manipulative and controlled. Qualitative one is emergence and portrayal. The quantitative research scholars will believe in use of formal instrument. Here, the research itself is an instrument. It is deductive. Quantitative one is deductive. Qualitative one is inductive. If quantitative one is experimental, then qualitative one is naturalistic. If quantitative one uses the numerical devices, then very little is used in the numerical indices in a qualitative one. Tools, on the basis of tools, they will also be differing. For example, questionnaire would be the most important tool in a quantitative method. According to the situation, gathering of the data and the use of the research instrument would be in the qualitative one. Data in a quantitative one is in the forms of numbers and statistics, whereas the data in a qualitative one is in the forms of words and pictures. We could also have a difference of quantitative qualitative on the basis of researcher's role. For example, in a quantitative research, detachment is more important. Objective portrayal of the social analysis seems to be the most important. But when looking at the qualitative one, it's a personal involvement is more important one. Let me anticipate one question. UPSC asked you one question, rapport establishment in research, isn't it? That how the level of interaction with the subject matter with where you have gone to study, that also makes the success of you collecting the data. The mutual trust, the process of interaction, and how you established a relationship with the people from whom you will be collecting the data. That all depends on the rapport establishment of RAPPORT possible. Let me quote Merton, Robert King Merton, particularly in terms of the Hopi Indians. He says somewhere whosoever is going to conduct the research, he needs to take a role in the universe where he has gone to work. There are innumerous works where the researcher will take a role, will try to become a part of the social system where he has gone for a lengthy stay. And once he takes a certain role, it provides him the way to peep into the social organization where he has gone to study or collect data. And adopting of this social role would basically be making him establish a better rapport, a better mutual trust, and a very in-depth level of interaction with the people. Gaining that trust will basically be making him gain more information. And thus, coming back, when you say that detached and impartiality characterizes the quantitative method, then the personal involvement and partiality is a part of the qualitative methods. If quantitative method is focusing on objective portrayal, then qualitative one is focusing on empathetic understanding in terms of collecting the data. This very methodological concern is in terms of the positivism and non-positivism, within which this quantitative and qualitative research becomes important. I quote two scholars here. Fred Kerlinger, he argues that to a quantitative research there is no such thing as qualitative. Everything is either 0 or 1, which could be quantified. Kerlinger, K-E-R-L-I-N-G-R. K-E-R-L-I-N-G-R, Kerlinger. In a quantitative research, there is no qualitative. Everything is either 0 or 1. ठीक है, वहीं पे एक नाम और लिखना बेटा, कैम्बेल, CMPBELL, कैम्बेल, DT कैम्बेल. उसका एक स्टेटमेंट लिखना, all researches have qualitative grounding. ग्राउंडिंग. तो पहला स्टेटमेंट हो गया करलिंगर वाला क्वांटिटेटिव का, दूसरा हो गया क्वालिटेटिव का, है ना? ठीक है. अगर ऐसा क्वेश्चन आता है, इफ देयर इज एनी क्वेश्चन इन टर्म्स ऑफ द क्वांटिटेटिव क्वालिटेटिव, तो एक नाम याद रखना, मिल्स एंड हैबरमैन. Right? What the sentence is? Two very simple sentences. He says that the debate between these two, quantitative and qualitative, has proved to be unproductive in sociology. Both need each other. All right. I said it that when you're looking at in terms of the certain debate in assumptions, the methods, the approach, role of the researchers, tools, nature, then basically up to here we have been raising the debate between quantitative, qualitative in terms of methodological dimension. But I said that the debate is basically in terms of the nature of knowledge. And how do we know about the things which we know? That is ontological. So that way the debate is also philosophical. So I said it is not only in terms of methodological but also philosophical. And in this philosophical, the two debates will be emerging out. More precisely from the qualitative dimension, that when we know the things, the nature of knowledge, that has to be understood it. Alright? दो लाइन लिख लो ना epistemological में. एक लाइन ऐसा लिख लेना. The debate between quantitative and qualitative is not merely methodological but also philosophical.
Not only methodological but also
Philosophical. Right? More precisely, the qualitative researcher, they believe that the best way to understand any phenomena is to view it in its context. Why? Because quantification is limited in nature and looks only at a small portion of social life. And thus, in the qualitative research, the philosophical debate will take place on the two lines, that is epistemological and ontological. Epistemology is conceptually concerned with the nature of knowledge and ways of knowing. Nature of knowledge, ways of knowing about the social reality. With which, once again I am saying the two perspectives that you know, positivism, interpretism has been talked in the last class. This question of you, which was asked in UPSC, required you to talk about the philosophical, the epistemological dimension in terms of the positivism and interpretivism. And when we have talked about, in a very brief, what positivism is all about, what interpretism is all about, then you can substantiate your view, that answer, from the perspective of Emile Durkheim versus Max Weber. Because we are talking about the positivism in a methodological perspective. Emile Durkheim's dimension in positivism, and opposite of that one, Weberian perspective will become the more important one. That how we basically need to interpret the meaning which has been attributed by the actor. And thus the first-hand method will emerge. And in this very perspective, this debate, that how do we know about the social reality which is socially constructed, that way the interpretivism will come out. The social reality which has an objective reality in terms of the social fact, which are the sui generis, as a fact that cannot be reduced to the intentions and motives of individual psychological disposition. From it, Durkheim will take his own stand. And opposite of this one, Weber will come out. But once again I am saying, when you have raised the debate in terms of positivism versus interpretism, this is basically the way to understand the social reality. None of them, neither Durkheim nor Weber, is denying the scientific status of sociology. That debate has not to be entertained in your answer now. And then when you talk about the ontological one, you can write down one line of ontological. It is the nature of being, or how do we come to know about things. इसमें एक लाइन और ऐड कर देना बेटा. Though they believe that there is no single existing reality, apart from our perceptions. ठीक है? Alright? I said that 3 dimensions has to be picked up: realism, materialism and idealism. Alright? Snapper and Spencer are the one who have basically classified this ontological of the qualitative research into the 3 perspectives. So the realism is claimed there is an external reality independent of what people think or understand. There is an external reality independent of what people may think or understand. Here, write down 1 or 2 lines on the sui generic nature of their kind. ठीक है बेटा? Whereas the materialism is saying that there is a real world, but only material world is real. There is a real world, but only material world is real. And other phenomena like belief, value, experience arise from material world. Are we not talking about the infrastructure suprastructure dichotomy? Alright? And here the Marxian perspective will emerge out. The third perspective in terms of idealism, ठीक है? Idealism, it maintains that reality can only be understood via human mind. If the reality could be understood only through the human mind, mind the line beta, socially constructed meanings via human mind and socially constructed meaning आ जाएगा फर्स्ट हैंड मेथड आ जाएगा, वेबर हो जाएगा, वेबर लिख लेना. ठीक है? द क्वांटिटेटिव एंड क्वालिटेटिव आर इनकम्पेटिबल. They need not be compatible with one another. Alright? Today we are talking about, ऐसा एक क्वेश्चन बन सकता है बेटा, mixed research, simple. So it is basically both, that they are not compatible with one another, rather they are complementary to one another. Alright? So the combination of quantitative and qualitative is basically mixed research. ठीक है? Alright? I'll take 2 minutes, I'll come back. Now we'll pick up at another aspect before I go in brief. And sometimes we need to be brief in terms of covering all the things. Of late I have been finding, not only in sociology but everywhere, particularly in social sciences, that the familyism and the familyist perspective is basically being asked. And sometimes very jokingly we say that today we need to know the assumptions on which the familyism has emerged out. Even in the research methodology, the familyist perspective has emerged out. 2 lines which I am saying, we try to recall back. When you talk about in a very simple sentence of the familyism, familyism is an ideology that believes in the equality between sexes. And that equality in terms of social, economic, political dimension. But somewhere, the familyism also tried to demystify the analysis based merely on the sex and brought about the perspective of gender. So the distinction between sex versus gender, that was highlighted. In a very simple sentence, sex is a biological construct and gender is a socio-cultural construct. The idea surfaced that gender can no more be marginalized in the understanding of society. What men say women do, that needs to be replaced by what women say they do. And thus, particularly in the understanding of society, a transition has started taking place from androcentric to gynocentric, male-centric to the women-centric one. This is a similar perspective which we will be using it in terms of understanding the gender relations in the research methodology. The feminist perspective in a research methodology is basically interested in knowing the conditions of the women in a group. Women as a subject, that becomes the more important one. Either we're talking about the notion of gender equality or if we talk about the power relations. The feminists started looking at, emphasizing on, that to be looked, that to be had in the research methodology. And particularly from the two names, which I'll be using it, if I write it down, the two names, from there we find about the certain kind of concretization in terms of methodology that has started emerging out in the research method, that is Judith Loan. She focused on the interdisciplinary. Today, we are also focusing on one term that is called transdisciplinary, going beyond the boundaries of the disciplines. Whereas Caroline Serif she calls it cross-disciplinary. I quote her line, one line. She says that when we are talking about feminist methodology, we need to call it cross-disciplinary. And in this very perspective, it is basically a distinct approach to sociological research, which has started focusing on the experiences, perspectives and interests of the women. It places gender at the center of analysis. This means that research is designed and conducted with the focus on understanding how gender shapes social relationship and experiences. Thus, it does not believe in, mind the word, mind the concept better, does not believe in methodological elitism. Rather, it based on women as an individual and women as a part of the social group. How the women as an individual brings the creativity and how she also brings about the variety, that was basically talked about. And in this very perspective, the feminist researchers, they basically challenged the traditional male-centric approach in understanding and examining the social phenomena. It is basically concerned with women as a group for the data collection. Try to bring about uniqueness in terms of gender equality, power relations or power dynamics, and subjective experiences of women, not the objective, because what has been depicted by the women and what the women are basically trying to provide the data, that will be the two way to talk about. So the emic dimension became the more important one, inside out dimension became the more important one, and that way the focus shifted on terms of the subjectivity. Patriarchal power structure was challenged, and it was in terms of the patriarchal power structure, the traditional approach of objectivity, which has somehow or other emphasized in a research methodology, that was replaced with the subjectivity. So the question which were there, not only talking about the women as a group, women as a data collection group, but you also need to talk about that how the shift is occurring from objectivity to subjectivity. It is not only acknowledging subjectivity, but it basically emphasizes on embracing subjectivity in the analysis of the research. And it focuses on reflexivity. You understand the reflexivity? Reflecting the role of women in research process. That's why once again I am saying that the shift is from the gyno, from andro to gyno. What men say women do is a male perspective. What women say they do is a women perspective. That way you basically need to put yourself in the place of that woman to understand their own subjectivity. And that has to be emphasized by you. Intersectionality was talked about. It is recognizes the social identities like gender, class, race. It's not making that these are not the categories. These categories are recognized. And apart from this category, the intersectionality was basically talked about. And in this very perspective, it basically, the feminist researchers also tried to bring about a change in the world. So changing the world is one of the objectives within which the question which was there. And it is not idiosyncratic, rather it is cumulative. That every research done by the women would be adding something new, and that way the cumulative impact would be coming out, not limited to the certain distinct aspect. So that's why I say it is not idiosyncratic, rather it is cumulative in nature. It recognized diversity. When you look at the culture, when you look at the gender, when you look at the race, when you look at the class. So the feminist researcher, they basically emphasized on the diversity. And why diversity? Diversity to improve the research quality. These are the certain things that we will have to talk about. Vicky Rendell, if we talk about Vicky Rendell. Its account of women's political participation in order to undermine the male dominance. So in terms of the gender relations, the power dynamics, social relationship, they all would be viewed from the newer perspective. But once again I am saying, if such kind of question comes out, it could be there in different units as well. The feminist theory which you have gone through, that has to be talked about. Though there will be competing stands in feminism, because if you talk about feminism, then there are so many questions which have come out. Like they ask with the patriarchal bargain as well. So you need to talk about the certain types of feminism, right from the liberal or equal right feminism, to the radical, to the Marxist, to the socialist, to the black feminism. Black feminism could be used in Dalit feminism in India as well. The cultural feminism. You could also expect from the movement, ecofeminism. So that way, the certain anticipation of questions will be coming out. But since we are talking about the research, then we talked about that how the male-dominated research, the traditional male-dominated research was basically challenged by the new women scholars. And that way, they basically talked about to view the gender relations, power dynamics, social experiences of women. And women as a group would be the core of the data collection. That way, interdisciplinary approach, sometimes the transdisciplinary, going beyond the boundaries of the discipline, that was a certain dimension that has been talked about. And I have quoted one or two names, even if you talk about the two names, because the methodological concern has basically been raised by Caroline Sarif. Alright. And that way, before that one Judith Lang has come out, that how the interdisciplinary approach should come out. But here, when you say that when we are talking about methodology in a research, then it should be basically in terms of the cross-disciplinary one. And that way, even if you remember only one name, you can substantiate. And if you don't remember any name, please do not quote the wrong name. And if you have forgotten, forget it. Put the essence on in terms of this one. And prepare that one there in terms of the research methodology, that question which was there. This is not an offbeat question. That was basically the use, testing your nerve when you're taking a mains. Alright? It could be understood only by those who have gone through the mains and when we have gone through the examination hall. Sometimes you find about the complete blackness comes out. You are complete hollow. So there, how do you respond? by looking at such kind of questions that will be there. Nothing is going out of the syllabus. Place the question into the context, and once you have been able to place the question on the context, the certain dimensions will come out and you will be able to do the justice with it one. Now when we are looking at this type, when we have talked about this one, then we need to talk about the variables, hypothesis. The very less questions have come from the variables and other kind of perspective. Alright? In a simple line which I said, that any concept that could be measured is variable. Concept which will be measurable is a variable. For example, in other words, any image, perception or concept that is capable of measurement, hence capable of taking different values, is called variable. Measurability is the main difference between variable and a concept. Once again I say, measurability is the main difference between concept and a variable. Alright? Variables which are measurable, though with a varying degree of accuracy. Variables could also be classified into the types. For example, cross effect model, पढ़ा है सब? ऐसे करो ना, classification of variable. Cause effect model, जिसमें causal connectivity हो. Independent variable, dependent variable, intervenous variable, ठीक है? You need to remember only one line, beta Mukul. Intervenous variable would be unmeasurable because so many factors could intervene. Okay. On the basis of the standard design, variables could also be divided into active variable and attributive variable. Active variable that could be manipulated and controlled, and that could also be changed. But attributive variables that cannot be measurable, manipulated, they cannot be controlled, and that cannot be changed. Alright? Like age, sex. And in the research, apart from the variable, the second most important consideration is the construction of a hypothesis. Hypothesis is a hunch, tentative hunch. But formation of hypothesis is the most important dimension in terms of sociological research. T.H. Huxley, you might have gone through him. He says most of the science which you talk about, the great stakes in the science have been achieved through the formation of hypothesis. Unless and until the scientist has a hunch, scientist has thought about something. Alright? Assumptions. So the great stakes have come out through the hypothesis. In a simple one, hypothesis is an assumption which lies between untruth and truth, whose validity is yet to be known. Now I am linking variable with hypothesis. That hypothesis is a conjectural statement between two or more variables. When you look at hypothesis, the function of hypothesis is to provide focus to the study. It provides direction to the study. what data to collect. Hypothesis provides a direction to this one. It enhances objectivity in the study. And hypothesis may add to the formulation of theory. It should be simple. It should be specific, conceptually clear. And while having the hypothesis, the researchers should have a familiarity with the subject area. But remember one sentence and mind the line better. Hypothesis should be capable of verification. When you are forming the hypothesis, tentative assumptions to look at the relationship between two or more variables, then your hypothesis which you have made should also be capable of verification. It should be related to the existing body of knowledge. It should be operational. All right. Research hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. In the research hypothesis, three are there: hypothesis of difference, hypothesis of association, and hypothesis of point relevance. Difference, hypothesis of association, and hypothesis of point relevance. And hypothesis of no difference is called null hypothesis. So here it is. ठीक है? Can I? सुन लेना केवल. Now let me give you one example. If in our research, if you have to study the smoking pattern in a reference to the gender, then the following hypothesis can be made. Now the first hypothesis is no significant difference in the proportion of males and female smokers. It is a hypothesis of no difference, null one, null hypothesis. इसी को hypothesis of no difference भी बोला जा रहा है. A great proportion of females than males are smokers. It is a hypothesis of difference. 2 times as many female scholars than males. It would be hypothesis of association. Total of 60% of females and 30% of males in the study population are smokers. This is basically hypothesis of point relevance. Right? तो यहाँ percentage में ला देंगे point relevance में, इसको association में ला देंगे 2 or 3 times, और इसको difference में ला देंगे. There is no difference. और difference को जब दिखला देंगे तो null hypothesis हो जाएगा. ठीक है? Yet another question which I was finding it from sampling. I don't know whether you people are aware of, not you people are quite young, like a son to me or daughter to me. Earlier at our times, when there was no pressure cooker, you find about on a certain utensils, the women of the house, they used to cook rice. And after some time, they will pick up few grains from this rice, boiling rice, and they will mess it And by messing it, they would be basically able to come to know that the rice is cooked. This is the best example of sampling, dear. Where every grains which is there in utensil being cooked has a probability of representation. Alright? So conceptually, sample is a subgroup of a population where a researcher is interested in. It is basically a process of selecting from a bigger, that is a sampling population, which becomes a base for estimating or predicting for an unknown. In a qualitative research, basically, sampling is of a little significance. ये line याद रखना बेटा, alright? Because whosoever will come out will be going for that sample in qualitative one, alright? Socially constructed, the individuals will be there. But particularly in terms of the statistical dimension, in terms of the numbers and the stats, in a quantitative research, sample will be the most important tool to understand that one. And that way, when you talk about the sample, choosing the few from the bigger population, the sample population. And in this very perspective, they are asking you basically the types of sample. In the last few years, jokingly, I say to the students in a foundation batch that earlier we never had an interest. When the sociology was taught to us, we never had an interest in methodology. Alright? But in the last few years, the way the questions have started coming out, whether you like it or not, you will have to listen to that one. We'll try. Alright? So the types of sampling. Alright? Simple random sampling. Is the first probable sample. It is the most commonly used or probable sampling. Each element in the population is given an equal and independent standard of selection. It means whichever the sample items are there, every item has the probability of representation, where each represents the same probability of being picked up, and where each is a representative of the sampling population. Then sometimes, rather than going for the simple random one, we stratified the random sampling. So second one is stratified. We basically try to stratify the population in such a way that the population within the stratum is homogeneous, with reference to characteristics based on the basis of which is being age, sex, we stratify. And once we have stratified, the same simple random will be coming out that everyone has the same probability of being picked up. And the third probable sampling is basically called cluster sampling. It reflects the ability of researcher to divide sampling population into two types, two groups called clusters, and thus to select the elements from each cluster by using simple random one. ठीक है मुकुल? Now when we look at the non-random, let me read the 2 lines for you dear. And remember this line. It does not follow the theory of probability. When I say it does not follow the theory of probability, then we are referring to the sampling population. But mind the second line here. It is used when number of elements in population is unknown and cannot be individually identified. Alright? I repeat the line. It is used when number of element in population is unknown and cannot be individually identified. In which the first type is quota sampling. जितना कोटा मिल जाए. The main consideration in this is the ease of access in sample population, in which the researcher seems to be guided by the certain visual characteristics, gender, race, ethnicity. Alright? That is of interest to the researcher. Randomization is gone. The sample is collected from the location convenient to the researchers. And wherever a population with visible relevant characteristics is seen, the data is collected. This process will continue until the researcher is able to contact the required number of respondents. Sampling में एक word और याद रखना बेटा concept. Point of saturation. A time will come in the sampling where you are not getting any new data. So the point of saturation will come out. So quota is non-random. Second one is accidental sampling. It is based on the convenience in assessing the sampling population. If the quota sampling attempts to include people possessing the obvious or visible characteristics, the accidental is having no such attempt. It is mostly used in market research. याद रखना है. Sometimes you might have found out when you are moving over near the mall or cinema hall, and you will find about certain leaflets, questions will be provided, and they will ask you. Alright? So this is basically used in a market research, and sometimes also used in terms of newspaper. Alright? Third one is called judgmental or purposive. The prime concern in this type is the judgment of the researcher as to who provides information or who will provide the information according to the situation what the researcher is working upon. The researcher goes only to those who in his opinion are likely to have the required information. So this is called judgmental or purposive sampling. And the last one is called snowball. Alright. It is basically a method to select samples using networks. For example, suppose somebody has, suppose if I picked up you and I am collecting the data from you, then I, the researcher, will also be asking you that can you refer someone similar to that one, and that way the snowballing rolling will come out, from whom the data required is collected, and then these samples are asked to identify other samples, and it continues till the saturation point is reached. ठीक है ना बेटा? 3 times this question has been asked. The random and a non-random, probable and non-probable sampling. Okay. So you talk about try to be a bit one-liners in terms of, because you have to write them 200 words. So the 7 are there. But try to give the finer points on this one. 1 year I was finding the question in terms of validity and reliability. दो लाइन सुनना बेटा. Validity is an ability to measure what is designed to measure. It means degree to which researcher has measured what the researcher has set out to measure. In a social science, there appears to be two approaches to establish validity of a research instrument. That is logic and a statistical instrument, which establishes validity. Face and content. लिख दूं क्या? लिख दूं? बहुत टाइम लग जाएगा बेटा आज. Look there. I told you last class as well, and once again I'm talking about your comfortability in your qualifying with getting the rank is the more concern of me. That is the reward to the teachers like me after so many years. I told you that there was the content syllabus which have been given is of 20 days. Very first tomorrow yesterday when I came out, I said that it could take 1 or 2 days more. All right? Because sometimes if it has taken time, so we'll pick up, we'll try to cover that one. All right? And if you ask certain questions, then you'll have to answer that one. So when you're talking about validity and reliability. Ability to measure what is designed to measure. So types of validity is face and content. मैं केवल लिख दे रहा हूं. ठीक है. Number 2 is called concurrent validity. No, please. All right. And construct validity. And what does reliability says? That if the research tool is consistent and stable, then it would produce the predictable and reliable one. The greater the degree of consistency and stability in an instrument, greater is the reliability. It means a scale or tool is reliable to the extent that is, it repeats measurement made by its under constant conditions. Though the wording of questions, physical environmental settings, mood of the respondents, nature of questions, they may bring about certain change. But what he wanted to measure, if he designed to measure, this is validity. And if it is a consistent and stable, it can be producing the predictable and reliable result is the reliability. ठीक है. बहुत छोटे में थोड़ा सा मेजरमेंट को जान लेते हैं. ठीक है. वी हैव अ टाइम. You take it.
No, I'll eat slowly.
Fine. 1 or 2 years they had asked the question. Let me say it. That despite the debate in sociological research going in terms of quantitative and qualitative, there has always been a point, there has always been a debate in sociology. The data cannot be quantified in a sociological one. Since sociology is more concerned of collecting data, primary data, and it sometimes becomes too difficult to quantify, it becomes too difficult to measure. And thus sociological research for a certain long time has been accused of lack of measurement. In this very perspective, the certain scaling techniques started emerging out. So these are talking about the measurement techniques. And in the measurement techniques, they have asked you the Bogardus and Rickert. But when we are looking at the research, basically, broadly it was assumed that much weightage has been given to qualitative method in sociology. That same debate we are talking about in qualitative, quantitative. And when we have given much weightage to the qualitative one, it becomes too difficult to quantify, to measure what we are studying. Within this perspective, the measurement technique will come out. And in a measurement technique, we are basically talking about the Bogardus. आसान है बेटा, बहुत आसान है. Named after the Bogardus. Extreme nearness to extreme farness, ये दो वर्ड याद रखना है. Right. For example, अगर मुझे समझ लो एक बार, अगर मैं ऐसा बोलूं, let me give the example of Delhi. And I'm sorry, it should be looked in a context. It should not be taken out of the context. Suppose if I ask the Delhi walas that when are so many people from the India are coming here, from the different states are staying there, they may have the certain prejudices. And I give them the certain choices. That whom do you want as a spouse? Delhites, Haryanvi, Rajasthani, Bihari, UPites, Maharashtrians. All right. Whom do you want to see in your neighborhood? Whom do you want to share your work office? And if I phrase the questions later on, whom do you do not want to see in your neighborhood? Whom do you want to debar from your country? Making me my question? The choices which you have made in the first, whom do you want to look at want to take as a spouse? If you have given the number, you'll find about the similar kind of things coming in from question 1 to 7. Bogardus has prepared the 7 questions. Agar if I say that I want to prefer X, and a very list have been given to Z, then Z would become the first one whom I do not want to see in my neighborhood, whom I do not want to see in my country. Am I able to make myself clear? Whom I want to take as a spouse would be the same priority in my neighborhood. It will be the same priority in terms of with whom I want to share my office. And that way, the social distance has been measured by Bogardus. Panel of judges have come out. I'll read out few lines. That Bogardus scale is used for social distance measurement, and it is named after E.S. Bogardus. The scale depends to a large extent upon the ratings of the panel of judges in determining a scale gradation, for which Bogardus selected more than 100 judges. And Bogardus asked the judges to formulate large number of type of social relation in terms of increasing degree of fairness. Mind the line beta. Increasing degree of fairness to decreasing degree of nearness. 7 of items were spread according to the rating of the judges. अब क्या क्या है बेटा? Whom would you marry? क्या क्या था? Choice दिया? Americans, Native Americans, Bulgarians, Canadians and Chinese. Alright. I repeat. Americans, Native Americans, Bulgarians, Canadians and Chinese. The first question was, whom would you marry? It is extreme nearness. The second question was, whom do you want as a regular friend? Alright. Third question is, whom do you prefer in your office? Fourth question is, whom do you prefer in your neighborhood? This is the fourth question. Now look at the fifth, sixth and seventh question. Fifth question is, whom do you want only as an acquaintance? Jaan pahchan. Sixth question, whom you not want to see in your neighborhood? And the last one, whom you want to debar from your country? This is extreme farness. Alright? That way, he found about that how approximately 1776 samples have been collected, and he found that how the Americans have a certain kind of social distance toward the natives of the other country. So this is very Bogart's scale. Likert scale is also called summation scale. ये याद रखना बेटा, जब भी स्केलिंग का क्वेश्चन होगा उसमें एक लाइन हमको हमेशा याद रखना है, that the questions will be there with through the panels of the judges. Alright? And who would be given, and that way the questions will be there. इधर हमने क्वेश्चन क्या किया वर्टिकल नोशन में 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. लिकर्ट स्केल में क्वेश्चंस आ रहे हैं हॉरिजॉन्टल में. जैसे मान लो तुमसे क्वेश्चन पूछता हूं मैं आज, अभी ऐसा चल रहा है पूरा, इफ यू लुक एट द पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम. हाउ डू यू रेट the current political system? Alright? And I'll give you choice. Highly satisfied. Satisfied. So. Dissatisfied. Highly dissatisfied. 5 in a row. And whatever the number of respondents have given, that could be summated with one another. So Likert scale is also called the summated scale. Alright? In which the different questions or items are prepared through the panel of judges. Each statement or item in a scale has equal attributional value or importance in terms of reflecting an attitude. The questions could be 5 or 7 in terms of strongly agree, uncertain, disagree, and strongly disagree. Alright? Let me give you the certain questions. These questions are also called, Likert scale में concept याद रखना. These questions are also called cafeteria questions. Cafeteria. Because they offer variety of answers to a subject. Alright. Now I am giving you the two questions to you, what the Likert has done. In a community where the blacks outnumber the whites, in which circumstance lynching of black is justifiable? And he is giving the choices. Never, very exceptional, as a third one, as a punishment for any brutal crime against white, punishment for intolerance towards white, and the last one is any sort of crime. 5 in a horizontal one. Clear hai, Mukul? And the second question, how far in educational system the intelligent blacks should be allowed? So same 5. Grade school, junior high school, college and professional school. ठीक है? Lesser to greater antagonism would be looked from these questions. ठीक है ना? और एक अब तो हम लोग नई गटमैन स्केल नहीं यूज करते हैं, तो उसके बारे में जानने की जरूरत नहीं. Do not go through the new one. Thurston scale is at another one. So Bogardus, Likert and Thurston. मैं थोड़ा सा I'll read out. It calculates the attitudinal value or weight for each statement, which is calculated on the basis of rating assigned by each judge. Each statement with which the respondents express agreement or they respond in affirmation is given an attitudinal score. The procedure for constructing the Thurston scale equal appearing. Number one, construction of statements reflective of attitude towards issues in question, whatever issue you have picked up. For example, if you look at Hindu-Muslim, if you look at communalism, if you look at anything. So this is the construction of statements. Selection of panel of judges who will be giving the attributional value to the questions. And then sending the statement to the judges on the basis of judges' rating, calculating the median value of each data. Mode median value pade. Discovering the statement which seems to be scattered. And then remaining statements, selection of the items and preparing one. So in the measurement mein, Bogardus or Likert or Thurston. Alright? Though they have asked, very specifically they have asked the question in terms of Bogardus and Likert. So Bogardus wale mein 7, vertical wale mein dal dena hai, extreme nearness to extreme farness, and इसमें horizontal में डाल देना है cafeteria questions, alright? और ये 2 क्वेश्चन जो मैंने दिया, कहां तक punishment of the blacks and how far you will allow the blacks in educational system, and that way you give this one. Alright, and from here, sometimes the very small questions comes out in terms of control experiment, in which you will be finding about the 2 groups. The 2 groups will be selected. One will be control, one will be experimental. Alright. For example, agar mujhe, if I as a researcher want to know that what is the impact of video games, alright, violent movies on the behavior of the children. So control experiment mein the study would be conducted 2 times. At one go we have selected and we have studied them. Then the group on which the experiment has to be done, another group in the same circumstances is a control group. One will be exposed to these all games. Previously we have understood the behavior. One we have exposed, we will be talking about this one. So that way they asked you the question on control experiment. Alright? Focus interview ka question tha. They asked you the participant observation. So in a participant observation, थोड़ा मैं बोल देता हूं भाई, ठीक है? Alright? Control experiment is a highly effective ways of collecting data and determining the pattern of cause effect. To conduct the control experiment, 2 types are selected. Experimental group, which is exposed to causal factors, where the researcher is experimenting, and the another group is called control group. Alright. However, it has to be kept in mind that all other conditions must be equal for both the groups. External influences are either eliminated or equalized, which is necessary to establish cause and effect relations. For example, if a sociologist wants to study what kind of TV programs or mobile games cause aggressive behavior in kids, the sociologist would need to conduct a control experiment to investigate. His chosen research in the question in which the behavior of the kids would be dependent variable, that is the presumed effect, and the independent variable, that is the presumed cause, would be exposed to violent programs or games. The sociologist will expose an experimental group of kids under controlled conditions to movies, serials, video games containing lots of violence. Whereas another group of kids would not be exposed to the movies. It is free of violence. They will be looking at the movies, programs, but it will be devoid of violence. That way the control experiments could be done. So you can give the example so that you can pick up the experimental group and control group. Content analysis, this was the one question. It is not done on people. Rather, it is basically the study of the cultural artifacts. Can I? मैं बोलता रहूं? Alright. You would agree with this sentence of mine that we as a sociologist when are looking at, and even if you are not knowing about any group or any group of people, any culture, a vast amount of knowledge could be gained about any group or any culture through the cultural artifacts, such as magazines, biographies, music, movies, graffitis, and all other kinds of cultural elements, giving way to cultural analysis. So the content analysis is basically the way of using cultural artifacts to measure about what people hear, say or see. What they write, hear, say or see. Once again I am saying, it is not the study of the people, but what has been written, said about the people, this is the more important one. Alright? It could be both quantitative and qualitative. जैसे मान लो कोई statement चल रहा अभी that Lok Sabha session is going on, and on certain issues, the frequency of the statement, the repetition of the statements, so that way that could be quantified, alright? How frequently it has been done, the portrait of the interactions, whether the portraits are constructed, alright? Content analysis would also help you, mind the line better, content analysis will also help you to understand the change over time. For example, जैसे, I don't know now whether there is no kid at home, so I am not looking at the nursery books at the time of my son, who is grown up like you people. So when I was going through his nursery books, at our time this kind of pictorial dimension was not there. So in a nursery books we find about that when you talk about the man and woman, we find about a certain kind of depiction of a woman and a man. Mostly, it will be depicted as the man is sitting on the office outside doing certain kind of business. Women should be depicted in terms of doing the household chores, caring of the child. Alright? How over the time this depiction has changed would be understood. So content analysis is basically focusing on the cultural artifacts. Alright? And that way the change over time could be studied. This method has advantage of non-reactive measures. ये word याद रखना, non-reactive. Non-reactive का मतलब क्यों है बेटा? Because you are basically talking about the magazines, graffitis, alright? People are not being studied by you. So people could be reactive. These magazines and others which we are basically trying to analyze, that will be the non-reacting one.
So non-reactive.
Non-reactive. है ना? Cultural artifacts Mukul has already been produced earlier. Since it has already been produced, they will not be having any kind of reactive element from the people. Alright. Biography का क्वेश्चन है, ये आसान है. Autobiography का टेस्ट तुम जानते ही हो. So that was one question they had asked you. Ethnography, writing about the people, which is the most important one in terms of the sociological research that has been asked. The description of the people where you have gone to study, in which the participant observation will be emerging out. And when you talk about the data collection, we talk about the participant observation. Observation, that could be basically been divided into two, participant and non-participant observation. Participant observation is basically a gone native way. That when you look at the participant observation, you might have gone through that when the researcher goes to the universe, social universe to study, he disguises himself in such a manner that he seems to be the part of that universe. Alright. So you can simply use one line that participant observation is basically a gone native way.
It is basically a
Gone native way. It is one of the most important qualitative method in which the researcher participates into the daily life of people under study. Alright. The researcher disguises himself in such a way that he or she is considered to be the part of society in which he or she studies. He participates in the activities of the group being observed in the same manner or without people knowing that they are being observed. Thus the researcher observes the happenings And in this very perspective, informally ask the questions, collect the data. Right. Malinowski, Argonauts of Western Pacific, 1922. Though he was trapped in the First World War, it was a very lengthy study. Particularly the two debates have been there. Natives language was one which was basically focused by Malinowski and A.R. Radcliffe Brown, who has worked on the Andaman Islanders. A very lengthy stay, 1.5 years kind of things. Corpus inscriptionum was the one word which was used by Malinowski in participant observation. That most of the time when we say about, suppose it is being asked to us that how this universe came, how the society came, how Hinduism came, how Islam came, alright, who were the first man and woman. We do not have such kind of data. How the institution of marriage come. But the moment we start focusing on the folklores, folktales, most of the data which the people are unable to answer could be found from there. We need to record such kind of folklores, myths, which is called corpus inscriptionum. However, when I've said about the natives language, in a participant observation, we will find about the 7 days study of the Nambekora Indians by Claude Lévi-Strauss, जहाँ से अलायंस थियरी मैरिज में आप पढ़ेंगे. मैंने किनशिप में आपको बोला था when we are talking about, इस बार भी आपको एक क्वेश्चन था इरावती कार्वे में, I'll pick up that one in terms of descent versus alliance in terms of northern and southern kind of perspective. तो क्लॉड लेवी स्ट्रॉस का डायमेंशन होगा. माइंड द वर्ड natives language and the language of the native. When you say in northern India, Hindi is the main language. But 20 pages here and there you will find about the language is changing. So it is not a natives language, it is basically language of the natives. And that way, the Gone native way, right from Malinowski to Martin to everyone. In India you talk about Evan Srinivas Cooks, alright? Talk about Andre Bete, Chamu Kheda by Yogendra Singh. Now we have one or two names and that we talk about this one. But there is a certain kind of ethical issues related to that one day. ऐसा भी एक क्वेश्चन आया बेटा ethical issues का. That we disguise ourselves in such a way that we become part of the society. Sometimes we play with the emotions of the respondents to collect the required data. Alright? They do not know the true purpose of us. And I'm sorry, I'm saying this one, because I have conducted my field work on the certain tribal groups in my PhD to get my doctoral thesis. Alright? Many times we do not reveal the actual purpose of our work. And sometimes we become partial. Alright? If I could quote Margaret Mead, that she said that when a researcher stays for a very longer time in a field with the participant observation, alright, he develops certain kind of relationship. And in terms of this one, he with whom he has a very good rapport, he will try to hide the facts. He will not write about them. Alright? Opposite of the participant observation is the non-participant observation. That you are observing the things from the distance. The researcher does not get involved in the activity of the group, remains passive observer, watching and listening people and their activities and conversations from distance, implying that the researcher remains detached and does not interfere into the activities of people being observed. एक बात याद रखना बेटा, many a times it becomes very awkward in terms of the non-participant observation. Alright? Sometimes you yourself becomes the non-participant observer. They do not want to. So it becomes very awkward and people's behavior may become unnatural. Alright? Because then you are looking from there. They are not natural with you. Alright? However, in between these two, this is my also the personal experience, that a complete participant observation is impossible. Alright. So sometimes on a certain issues we are having the participant role of the participant observer. Sometimes we become the non-participant observer. So that way the quasi-participant observation is in between these two. That on sometimes we are having the role of the participant observer, sometimes we are non-participant observer. This is called quasi-participant observation.
So non-participant observation and
W.F. White, street corner gang, है ना? So कहता है कि I started with a non-participant observation and I becomes a non-observable participant. Dog, the head of the group says one day informally to him that when we are sitting, it becomes too difficult to plan. Street gang है ना, तो उसको कुछ crime करना है. तो कहता है we become very conscious that we find that someone who does not belong to our group is sitting over there listening our plan. Sometimes it becomes too difficult to say this kind of things. So when you are having no part, the detachment, looking it from the outside, the people also ignore you. Alright? The inherent meaning behind the activities may not sometimes be known through the non-participant observation. Alright? The mixture of this is called quasi-participant observation. Questionnaire, set of questions, prepared and sent by the mail. So बहुत बार इसको mail questionnaire भी बोलते हैं. दो वर्ड केवल याद रखना बेटा. The questionnaire could be open-ended and close-ended. Close-ended में choice नहीं है. Agree, disagree, no, yes. Open-ended में your personal opinion is being talked about. For example, if I say, same example I am saying, are you satisfied with this current political structure? I give you the option, yes, no. It is a close-ended one. But when I say, why? The opinions may vary, so it will become very difficult to quantify that one. Alright? So, that way the things would be there in terms of open-ended and close-ended. मुझे मालूम नहीं कभी क्वेश्चन तुमसे पूछा है या नहीं पूछा है. Alright? मैं फिर भी एक बार थोड़ा सा तुम्हारे लिए उसको कर देता हूं. और कुछ it is whether the written list of items or questions, the answer to which are to provided by the respondents. In questionnaire, a list of questions are framed by the researcher and then sent to the respondents. Sometimes though mail, thus also called mailed questionnaire. अब इसमें दो चीजें हैं बेटा. Objective of the research has to be on the front page. That why this research is being conducted. This is the first one. Framing of the questions, they do not change. And the respondents to whom you have sent, it is a limitation because it also reflects that the respondents must be literate. Alright? They at least know how to read and write. Questionnaire, if at one time provides you the easy access to, in a shorter time, larger sample population, then it also becomes time consuming one. Because most of the time people do not respond back. You have to send the reminders. Alright? But in every questionnaire, the objective of the research, and if you are working with the organization, what is your organization, who you are, what kind of research and why this research is being conducted, that has to be specified. Alright? Most of the time, in a very personal questions, both the limitation and plus point could be looked in the same line. Sometimes there are so many questions, so many issues in our life, where if somebody is sitting next to us and when I am aware of that somebody is watching me, I may not be free to express myself. Alright? That could be done through the questionnaire. But the limitation would be that when I am answering the questions, when I am writing it, what kind of gestures, grimace I have, that I cannot understand because I am not physically present over there, because that has been sent by the mail and the respondent will feel and send it back to me. अब एक लाइन को याद रखना. When the same set of questions, I don't know whether this question would be asked or not, when the same set of questions is not sent by mail but the researcher himself takes to the respondents, asks and fills the answers. It is called schedule. Alright? New pronunciation is coming out in terms of schedule. Alright? So this is schedule. Questionnaire is sent to the respondents. You take the question to the respondents. Alright? There is a one advantage in a schedule. If the respondent has not understood the questions, you clarify it and you can get the answer. Alright? ठीक है बेटा? इंटरव्यू. ऑलराइट. इससे भी तुमको क्वेश्चन है फोकस ग्रुप एंड इंटरव्यू पे. ऑलराइट. मैं एक बार इंटरव्यू का एक डाटा तुमको देता हूं बेटा, उसको एक बार लिख लेना, एक बार देख लेना. Okay. This is not rigid, rather it is a flexible. There is also flexibility in interview content and a questions. ठीक है? इसका टाइप्स क्या क्या होगा, कभी ऐसा याद आता है? जैसे in-depth interview. ठीक है? In-depth interview का theoretical orientation could be traced back to Weberian interpretive movement, knowing about the meaning attributed by the actor. So it says the in-depth interview in sociological research qualitative dimension is a theoretical dimensions could be traced back to Weber's interpretative movement. ठीक है? फेस टू फेस इंटरेक्शन एंड रिस्पोंडेंट्स पर्सपेक्टिव is the two main dimension in this in-depth one. Face to face and respondent's perspective. ठीक है? इसका सेकेंड टाइप है फोकस ग्रुप इंटरव्यू. Alright. Only difference is the word says. The only difference is in-depth interview we are focusing on individual. On the focus group interview we are focusing on the group. ठीक है? Broad topic discussions are selected. ऐसा कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं बना है स्ट्रक्चर टाइप का. Broad topic discussions with the group which we will be discussing about, that is a focus group interview. Then narratives. ठीक है? It is a less structured than focused group interview. ठीक है? एक वर्ड और याद रखना है, नो प्रीडिटरमाइंड कंटेंट. ठीक है? The researchers want to hear the personal experiences of the person or any happening in his life. ठीक है? और ओरल हिस्ट्री चौथा है इसका. तो और स्ट्रक्चर्ड में क्या हो गया? सिमिलर, सेम सेट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस, द क्वेश्चंस आर फिक्स्ड, हैज अ rigid structure, and there is a rigidity in the questions and its wording as well. वो स्ट्रक्चर्ड हो गया. ठीक है. Biography, ethnography, sometimes they may ask the question on historical methods, so it starts from the early times. All right. Well, last class when I was talking about the history with the sociology, I talked about that how history is the treasure of information. From there, if we talk about right from Pareto to Marx to Durkheim to Weber, we'll be finding about the use of historical methods. Comparative method has been asked. All right. And in a comparative method, you need to remember one line, that is Durkheim's comparative method in terms of causal connectivity, which just I was talking to. And that statement of Durkheim, that comparative method is not a method, rather it is a sociology in itself. So there could be questions on historical methods and comparative methods. All right, I'll just take 2 minutes and I'll begin that one. Just मुझे 2 minutes और दे दो. While watching the video, what I was asking these people, that you make a point-wise synopsis, and once you have made it, look at the questions of the last few years, and then do that one. All right. I'll read out few for you so that you can get some line, and then I come to the theoretical stands. And don't worry, the theoretical stands will also be picked up when you pick up the thinkers. All right. I said historical methods is the one. I'm reading few lines so that you can be able to recall back. It is yet another method of data collection, right since the inception of sociology as a discipline. Even in the anticipation of sociology, historical data has been the most significant tool, containing a storage of knowledge or information. Thus, it is argued that sociology as a subject is highly indebted to history. The early sociologists like Kant, Spencer, Durkheim, Marx, Sorokin, Weber, all have used the historical data. In the origin of development, transformation of the social institutions, the usefulness of historical data is the most imperative one. It's the prerequisite one. Marx, we were talking about historical materialism, that will be the one important one. When Durkheim picks up the metaphor from mechanical to organic, and then how when he says it is a happy human development, he'll be finding about the use of historical data. Weber as an historian will be using data in terms of bureaucracy, Protestant ethics, capitalism. All right. So that way the historical, sometimes this question will come out. And comparative method, I say that how we'll be comparing the two societies or two cultures, all right, to talk about the similarities or the differences. It is a study method for different types of societies and groups in order to determine analytically the factors that led to similarities or differences in a specified group or a culture. यहाँ से एक क्वेश्चन बना है तुमको, एक क्वेश्चन तुमको शायद इससे बन चुका है केस स्टडी पे, फ्रेडरिक लीप्ले फैमिली बजट, जहाँ से फर्स्ट टाइम दैट दिस वेरी टर्म ऑफ द केस स्टडी वाज यूज्ड. तो ऐसा एक क्वेश्चन, एक फोकस ग्रुप पे क्वेश्चन आपको है. सो जस्ट लेट मी गिव यू फ्यू डेटा दैट केस स्टडी इज बेसिकली कंसिडर्ड an ideal methodology, particularly during historic independent investigation. Frederick Lepley is considered to have introduced the case studies method is in social science in the study of family budget. It may often be individual, institution or system or organization, a community or an entire culture. Thus, Singh defines case study as an empirical inquiry which investigates a contemporary phenomena with its real life content. It does a kind of research design which usually involves the qualitative method of selecting the sources of data and offering a holistic account which permits insight into the case under consideration. तो ये का डाटा केस स्टडी का है. जीनियोलॉजिकल टेबल ही बनाते हैं केस स्टडी जब लेते हैं तो. एक फोकस ग्रुप पे ऑफबीट क्वेश्चन एक साल तुमको पूछ दिया. इट इज अ क्वालिटेटिव रिसर्च मेथड ऑफ डाटा कलेक्शन इन सोशियोलॉजी. In the last few decades, focus group and group interview have emerged as a popular technique for gathering data or qualitative data in the sociological research. And a wide range of topics have been picked up within which the focus group interview that has been talked about. David L. Morgan defines focus group as a research technique that collects data via group interaction on the topic determined by the researcher. The focus group, by its definition, reflects three essential components. It is a research method for data collection, interaction in the group as source of data, and the researcher's active role in creating group discussions for data collection. ये तीन चीज तुमको focus group में याद रखना है. So the data collection would be there in terms of this one. I hope in terms of this, the qualitative to quantitative we have picked up in terms of the research. And then in the same debate of quantitative, qualitative or in terms of the sociology as science, कुछ जो debate है वो theoretical stands का debate है बेटा. Can I? Yesterday I talked about the theoretical stance. Basically, I gave you the one very simple perspective to look at, and where I said about that you talk about the macro and micro kind of one. So when you're looking at the theoretical stance, you basically need to look at the certain dimensions or the certain theoretical schools so that the things will become the more easier one in part of you. If I say that if you're looking at the macro one, so here if I say, you might be familiar with this one. All right.
Discuss the difference between functionalist and structural functionalist.
All right. The question was there, he asked me that it was in terms of functionalism and structural functionalism. Let me give you one example. पहले समझ लो बेटा, आसान है एकदम. If in a very generic terms, if I give you a sentence that function of religion is to bind people together, if I am using the Durkheim's perspective, all right, this is a function analysis. That how religion as an institution performs certain function which proves to be beneficial to the society. When you use the word, English word function, it has come from the Latin fungi with the verb functus, which means to serve a purpose. You need to remember this word because this will be used in a mutton. Teleological, that way mutton will be emerging as a critic to Parsons. And right from Aristotle times, they will finding about the teleological one, telos, to serve a purpose. Once again I am saying, the English word function has originated from the Latin fungi with the verb functus, which means to serve a purpose. It is how the different institutions, customs, practices, uses, they basically function in a society in a beneficial, useful manner would be the dimension on the functionalism. But when I say religion binds people together, so religion, when I look at religion not only as a functioning, but I begin with the structure of a religion. What is the structure? A structure is an arrangement of parts. For this, here we are sitting in a room. A room has arrangement, bricks upon bricks. So when I said about the structure of religion, then deity, supernatural entity, the priest, the believers, the belief, the practices, these are the certain components which provide religion a structural perspective. Function of which is to bind people together. क्लियर है? ये स्ट्रक्चरल फंक्शनलिज्म कहाँ पे पढ़ेंगे हम लोग? तीनों में, खासकर हम लोग पार्सन्स में और मर्टन में. And structural functionalism has also to be understood by us, particularly in terms of when we are looking at M.N. Srinivas. M.N. Srinivas with his Cambridge days would be witnessing the impact of British structural functionalism. So he would basically be tutored by two structural functionalists, A.R. Radcliffe Brown and Sir E.E. Vance Pritchard. Alright? A structural functionalism has a three tradition. French tradition, which begins with Emile Durkheim in sociology. followed by Claude Lévi-Strauss. Okay? Claude Lévi-Strauss will also be talking about in terms of a structuralism, with which we will be understanding Louis Dumont, pure and impure in a caste system where we talk about. It was basically he brought the use of the modern structuralism in the study of caste. So Hegel और Claude Lévi-Strauss को link कर देंगे, Louis Dumont आ जाएगा. Claude Lévi-Strauss has given the concept of binary opposition. This binary opposition which you go through in terms of Louis Dumont is basically taken from Claude Lévi-Strauss. ठीक है, लुई डुमो के वर्क में ही अलायंस थियरी आपको दिखेगा इंडियन किनशिप सिस्टम में, सदर्न किनशिप में. दैट इज ऑल्सो बेस्ड ऑन द वर्क ऑफ क्लॉड लेवी-स्ट्रॉस. इतना खाली एक लाइन का कंसेप्चुअल क्लैरिटी इज नेसेसरी. In the British, there are so many scholars, right from Eric Brown to Sir Evans Pritchard to Mayor Fortes to Edmund Leach. ठीक है. American structural functionalism has a two prominent scholars, that is Salker Parsons and Robert King Martin. क्लियर है मेरी बात? A structure and a function. So जैसे अब कास्ट में यूज कर ले. So caste has a structure in terms of Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Function of which is to bring unity, to maintain the system. है ना? So क्या क्या बात करेंगे ये लोग? हार्मोनी की बात करेंगे, कंसिस्टेंसी की बात करेंगे, करेंगे ना? इम्प्रिकलिटी की बात करेंगे, सिंक्रेटिक सिस्टम, सिंक्रोनाइजिंग, ये सब डायमेंशन की बात करेंगे. सो टुमारो व्हेन वी विल कम टू द थिंकर्स वी विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस वन. सो दिस इज द फंक्शनलिज्म, एंड यू नीड टू रिमेंबर दैट व्हेन यू पिक अप द सर्टेन डायमेंशन इन फंक्शनलिज्म, that if any item which has been picked up and whose function is to be basically assessed, you basically looking at that how it is serving a purpose. Let me remind you, when you started going through unit 5, that is the social stratification, and in social stratification this is the functionalist perspective. Sometimes you find the questions either on Talcott Parsons, you find mostly the questions have been there from the Davis and Moore, alright. And any one of you whosoever has gone through social stratification is aware of the fact that social stratification is a institutionalized structural inequality. Inequality is there in social stratification. Now if we use the functionalist analysis, then even if inequality is there, this inequality must be functional. Clear है? अब तुम डेविस एंड मूर को पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है दोस्त. That social stratification is an unconsciously evolved device that ensures that the most talented one is matched with the most important position of the society. That's how I know. If the inequality is there, inequality must serve a purpose. So that's why once again I am saying that functionalism has basically come from the Latin fungi with the form verb functus, which means to serve a purpose. Right? It means in a functionalism, the purpose of any institution or any part of the society that is there, that how it is performing or how it is serving a purpose becomes the more important, which is contributing to the stability of the system, maintaining of the system. It originates right from the works of Aristotle, that will be, but particularly in sociology when you are looking at, you will be finding about that how right from the Auguste Comte, the functional analysis will come out, and whosoever. We'll be talking about the organic analogy. Alright? You'll be finding about every functionist will be talking about the organic analogy. Comparing the social system with that of the biological system. Like if you're talking about the human body is composed of the different parts, every part has a certain specific function. So is the social system. And that way, every functionist will be talking about the organic analogy. Either we're talking about Parsons or Merton, this organic analogy will be coming out. So how any item or any custom or folklore or any uses, which is social uses, they perform or serve a purpose would be the functionist one. So this is the one which we are talking about, and then conflict perspective, alright? Conflict as a dynamo of change, within which the Marxian perspective will be becoming the more important one. But both this functionalism and conflict are the macro theorists. Society as a whole is being viewed. Alright. And then when we look at the theoretical stands, from here we will be finding about time and again I have talked about in terms of interpretive or interpretivism, within which we'll be talking about the work of Weber, Wustin will be coming out, empathetic, reflexivity will be coming out, knowing the meaning or how the social reality is constructed by gaining the meaning attribute of the actor, that become the more important one. And from there, we'll be talking about alright, G.H. Mead, Herbert Blumer, alright, the active self. अगर मैं ऐसा एक बनाऊंगा, कभी ज्यादा डील करूंगा, when I'll come to the Mead. I don't know how far the two boys have been clear to you now. In the first diagram, the actor is looking at the values, or he is not looking at the values here. ऐसा diagram बना जो इधर हो, उसके पीठ के तरफ हो, on the back of. So he has understood the values, norms, roles and status, and then he indulges in action. This is the functionist one, this is the positivist one भी हो सकता है. In a symbolic interactionist one, the actor is not passive recipient. The actor is basically the active agent. So he is confronting it. In every situation he will understand, evaluate, and then he will be acting. Alright? And that way, the difference between the positivism and symbolic interactionism we talked about. Last class, while talking about the sociology as a science, I talked about that 1 year they asked the question, idealist and symbolic interactionists, how they become critic of the positivism. This diagram will do. So, I don't know how far you have been able to approach G.H. Mead with the help of Hegel, Charles Darwin, Dog's Fight, Einstein relativity. So that way you will be finding about this all perspective. So that way the symbolic interactionism will be coming out. So I read out few lines for you. The conflict theories emphasizes on the role of coercion and power, which is the ability of a person or group to exercise influence and control over others in producing social order. If functionalism focused on consensus, harmony, the conflict theory focused on the coercion. In the conflict theory, the work of Karl Marx is the most significant one, who pictured society as a fragmented or divided into groups that compete for socio-economic reward. From there, the class dimension of Marx will be coming out, and I had told you that the base of social stratification will be class. So you are looking at the evolution of the Western society particularly, and then you will finding about the primitive communism to the ancient society, to the feudal society, to the capitalist, to the socialist society. That with the class dimension will come out, and through this we will be talking about the class conflict, the dynamo of change. Ralph Dahrendorf is another scholar, alright, who will not only be critical of Parsons, but who will also be critical of Marx, alright. That sometimes it is always argued that absence of conflict means abnormality of society. There is no society where the conflict is absent. So any society which is saying that there is an absence of conflict, it is basically reflecting abnormal condition of that society. So that way, these are the macro one. Alright, थोड़ा सा बेटा symbolic interactionism में थोड़ा सा हर्बर्ट ब्लूमर को लिख लो. Though we quote symbolic interactionism, G.H. Mead, Chicago School will be related, but it was basically as a theoretical module or proposition, it was basically proposed by Herbert Blumer, the resident of Mead. Alright. So he says that the characteristics of this approach is human interaction, interpretation of definition rather than mere reaction, a response based on meaning, use of symbols, and interpretation between stimulus and responses. Alright? Symbolic criticism is basically emphasizing on interaction among the people, use of symbols in communication and interaction. Interpretation as a part of action, self is constructed in society. तो तुमको एक क्वेश्चन मिलेगा, सेल्फ एंड सोसाइटी आर इंटरट्वाइंड, वन आई एंड मी का डायमेंशन होगा. ऑलराइट. So the moment we talk about the me, will be coming about. Then phenomenology. Right?
What's the difference between both and interpreting? Because all three indirectly mention.
All seems to be interpreted by Weberian work. Every micro theory, alright, after the idealism or social action perspective or interpretism of Weber, they seem to be highly influenced by the Weberian dimension, in which the meaning, in which the Verstehen, in which the subjectivity, the perspective of value, which all will be coming out. Alright, more or less all will be talking about the similar kind of dimensions with a bit of difference. ठीक है, इसमें किसको याद रखना बेटा? Edmund Husserl. रमेश दो याद रखो ना, तुमको छोटा सा क्वेश्चन है ना. पीटर बजर का बहुत सा स्टेटमेंट है कहीं कहीं पे आके. ठीक है. फेनोमेनोलॉजी इज ऑल्सो नॉन पॉजिटिविस्ट, कल मैंने कहा था आपको. इट ऑल्सो इज अ माइक्रो सोशियोलॉजी. इट फोकसेस ऑन द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ द फेनोमेना, anything perceived by our senses. Husserl argues that we need to basically look at the intellectual process in the experience of phenomena which is not priori. A priori का मतलब जो fixed नहीं हो. So in this very perspective we are talking about how the actors interpret and everyday action and construct common sense knowledge. ठीक है, that we can be using that in terms of common sense and sociology. तो यहाँ से सूज और हसल को लाना है. मैं थोड़ा सा और करूंगा because the time is shorter. And then ethnomethodology, Hurlold Garfinkel. हाँ. ठीक है ना, थोड़ा सा दो लाइन लिख लो उसमें. इट इज ऑल्सो नॉन पॉजिटिविस्ट. Another domain of micro perspective. ठीक है. Sets out to uncover the methods and social competence which we as a member of social group imply in constructing our sense of social reality. Right? Does not view individual as cultural dog.
Does not view individual as
Cultural DOP, DOPE. Huh. Rather acknowledges that social reality in effect is created by इंडिविजुअल. ठीक है ना? इसका मतलब हो गया बेटा, सोशल रियलिटी इनफैक्ट इज अ अकम्प्लिशमेंट ऑफ रैशनल अकम्प्लिशमेंट ऑफ इंडिविजुअल. है ना? और एक लास्ट में तुमसे कहीं क्वेश्चन ऐसा पूछ दिया है, डर्मेटोलॉजिकल. देख लो डर्मेटोलॉजिकल. गॉफमैन. है ना? एक क्वेश्चन तुमको आया है ऑबिट में. एक क्वेश्चन आजकल बनना शुरू हुआ है. उसका किताब का नाम लिख लो, प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ सेल्फ इन एवरीडे लाइफ. मुकुल कुछ लाइन लिख लो उसमें ना. People assume roles that they use in their daily interaction with others. Role could be understood in two ways. Public portrayal of a character. ठीक है ना? And the second one, representation of a part played in reality. ठीक है? अब लाइन को सुना बेटा. These roles the individuals play to create certain impressions. ठीक है? So they present their self character just as the actors are producing their character in a theater audience. होगा ना? So दो वर्ड उसमें याद रखना है. थिएटर मेटाफोर जब भी लाओगे गवर्नमेंट में तो पहला ये वर्ड यूज करना तुमको फ्रंट स्टेज और दूसरा बैक स्टेज. जो पब्लिक प्रेजेंटेशन है वो फ्रंट स्टेज है और जो प्राइवेट कंपोनेंट का डायमेंशन है वो बैक स्टेज है. ठीक है? इंप्रेशन मैनेजमेंट आ जाएगा उसमें. काफी है. ऑल द वर्ल्ड इज अ स्टेज and all the men and women merely players. ये स्टेटमेंट भी है उसका. ठीक है? Once again I am saying, let me repeat, these theoretical stands in a brief will be also be coming when we will pick up the 6 scholars. One by one they will be coming out. When you're talking about the relevance of the scholars, these theoretical strands will come out. Just I was talking to the people present here, I told you that when we're looking at the micro perspective after the interpretivism, or even idealism if we talk about where Weber will be coming out, new idealism. Most of the perspectives in a micro sociology is highly indebted to Max Weber. And in that way we'll be talking about tomorrow Karl Marx and Emil Durkheim. Alright. Some data I had shown you in terms of the approach, because the questions are coming out in terms of this one. So the comparative analysis is also to be done. In the last class I talked about that if you are looking at positivism and a critique to positivism, both Durkheim and Marx could be picked up. I told you that if you are looking at Marx with a dialectical approach, he raises one concern, that is, what is the purpose of method? Is the purpose of method is to repeat the things which is already known? He says no. The purpose of the method is basically to eradicate the self-delusion or self-doubt. And thus he said the purpose of method is negative. The moment you say the purpose of method is negative, dialectical process will emerging out. And once you talk about the dialectics, we'll be talking about a Hegel. And that way, dialectical idealism versus historical materialism, that debate will be going on. So we'll be talking about in a brief. I'll just add some dimensions. But we'll also be focusing on the certain kind of the historical, socio-historical backgrounds within which the thinkers have emerged out. I don't know how we'll be taking the line of mind when I sometimes say there's nothing new in Marx. If you talk about socialism, you have to talk about Saint Simon and others. If you talk about dialectics, you'll have to look at the impact of Hegel. If you talk about the theory of surplus value, you'll have to know about the British politico-economic system within which the work of Adam Smith will be coming out. So that way we'll be talking about the contribution of Marx, and then we'll be going in terms of looking at the nature of questions, all right? Because usually when we talk about the thinkers take a lot of time in a foundation batch. If you look at, if most of you have done the courses, and you might have found about that how, when you do the foundation course, that out of the 5.5 months, we find about almost 1.5 or 2 months is taken to the thinkers, because every thinkers will be taking 7 or 8 days, will be going in depth kind of understanding. But here, since we are basically going for the maximizing marks, and we are going for the crash course kind of advanced course, so we'll be talking about in a brief, and we'll be going into that dimension of the Marx and Durkheim. All right? Thank you. We'll be meeting tomorrow. All right? This is a shortage of time, and because I had thought of that I'll be getting at least 1 hour to talk about the theoretical stands. But anyway, so certain basics have been given, and in between the certain points come out, I'll remember, and then I'll be picking up certain dimensions. I'll be making, I'll summarize while writing some of the points in terms of the theoretical stands as well, so that the obit questions could be addressed by you. All right? Thank you. We are meeting tomorrow.